the difficulty, the painfulness it is to watch this unfold. As you look at these towers, the landmarks of the New York skyline, with smoke and flames shooting out of them, debris pouring out, and then occasionally passing by us now, Commissioner Carrick, and he won't have any time for me.
The question is, let me put you on.
Say again, Steve.
Let me talk to Jim Dolan here for one moment. Stay with us. Jim, if a third plane is indeed, and this is certainly speculation, on its way, what would be the plan of attack? Would you take that plane out before it got to that point?
They're making those decisions as they go. There may not be another a plan in place for this kind of a situation. The question may be, what's its target? What is its target? Is it going for the World Trade Center again, or is there some other building? Joe, what I'm curious about, Joe, are you with us?
Joe Torres, thank you.
Joe Torres.
Hello, I'm sorry, Jim.
Hey, Joe, let me just ask you about this third plane, the possibility of this third plane. Have they spotted this plane? Do we know?
Listen to video. Sorry, Glenn. Sorry, Jim.
That's okay. Joe, do we know if they've actually seen this third plane, or whether there was a phone call in that warned of a third plane? Do you know where that information comes from?
No, I was standing next to an officer as he related to FBI agents who were coming out of their offices located here in Lower Manhattan. I just saw Commissioner Carrick. Could you just see if you
Well, I'm sure there's no question that if they have information that there is a third plane, they are taking every precaution possible, and I would not want to be a plane in this coverage area, in this area right now, flying in a place they should not be flying.
And then comes too the reports of one possibly being hijacked, and whether or not someone could be in that third.
Joe?
Yeah, no, again, it was strictly radio information from a quite energized police officer who got information relayed to him to take precautions. I don't know how that information came across, if it was information over a radio, if it was actually an eyewitness or another officer in another location, but I'm sure police are certainly manning all radio frequencies, but again, how that information came across, Jim, I couldn't tell you, because it was more here for the people here, a precautionary measure to just get out of the way.
Joe, does it seem like police and emergency services have things under control there, or is it still quite chaotic?
Yeah, they've surrounded a blocked off a 2-block area. It's just police, emergency, fire officials that are pouring in from every direction. FBI agents, we've seen Secret Service agents coming out of their offices as well, just coming out of the buildings because they've been instructed to do so, because they don't know what's going to happen next.
Any chance?
So yeah, I think the surrounding blocks around World Trade seem to be blocked off, and I only see emergency personnel. But nonetheless, they have as many questions as we do.
But what about just people that are in the area around you, Joe? People who are coming out of buildings. Have you been able to talk with them at all?
We've talked to only a few, because either most had not made their way to the offices or had gone out through another entrance. Keep in mind, it's very difficult for us to move around. We get to a location where we can get the most information. We kind of stick where we are. And then, of course, we've got numerous police officers telling us where to go and where not to go. So we're just trying to stay close to NYPD, close to FBI, because if we know we're close to them, then we are safe as well.
All right, Joe, hang in there for 1 second. We want to go to Nina Pineda.
Work in the office buildings have come out. We've seen a few. We talked to one gentleman also briefly. Said he worked in World Trade, was down in the lobby at the time of his explosion. Talked to us for 2 seconds before he couldn't go on any longer because he felt his colleagues were upstairs and was wondering about their...
All right. Thank you, Joe. Hang with us there, Joe, for a moment. Daily population just handed this note, 50,000 to 70,000 workers in the World Trade Center at any given time. That's certainly what the average is. Nina Pineda standing by at Broadway and Chambers, I believe. Nina?
Steve, and we were just moved back about 3 blocks. We were right near the World Trade Center when police in riot gear practically started pushing the crowd back and screaming there was going to be another explosion. They were having reports that there was another plane in the air. It was truly a scene of chaos and panic as they tried to move the crowds back. People have been crying in the streets. There are no phone services down here. People cannot use their cell phones. They can't use their walkie-talkies. There's lines about 20 people long trying to use the telephone to reach loved ones. Some people are trying to reach loved ones that worked in the World Trade, but right now we have people crouching behind cars, police trying desperately to move the crowd back. They move the crowd back quickly, about 4 or 5 blocks. screaming that there was going to be another explosion. Right now, they say their concern is that another plane was in the air. That's what they were being told here on the ground, or that pieces of the World Trade Center were going to begin falling. And from what we see, we are seeing big chunks of the building fall to the ground, and also some horrible, horrible, and terrifying witness accounts from people here that saw bodies falling from the building. They said that one gentleman said he saw 4 or 5 bodies falling from the top stories of the World Trade Center, and several people that gave us witness accounts were crying their eyes out, saying it's been terrifying to see the first one, and then they were all watching and saw the second plane impact the second tower. Right now, we are still at West Broadway and Chambers as police have formed a line to keep the crowd back, but there is truly a scene of chaos here on the ground as folks are looking in the air, afraid for another impact.
All right, Nina, hang tight for a minute. We'll come back to you. Thank you for that update. In the meantime, Jim, let's go back to you because Nina did talk about that third plane being a security operation. What does that mean?
I'm sorry, I was trying to get information about the cause of this crash, and what we are hearing right now, excuse me, Lori, for not answering your question,
Okay.
let me get right to this.
Jim, let me just, we just got word from the first plane. It was hijacked from Boston. That's what you were asking before.
I was.
So
The first plane is hijacked from Boston. And also we want to point out that that third plane that we have talked about was apparently not, it was a security vehicle, it was an airplane vehicle. Let me just tell you real quickly,
You know what? I'm going to interrupt you. We're going to go to ABC Network right now for the very latest. Let's listen.
We did not hear it. In fact, we were trying to figure out from the White House what security precautions they were taking around the White House in the wake of the apparent attacks on the World Trade Center, and we suddenly just saw the smoke rising from behind the old executive office building. We have people on their way there now, but it's like nothing I've ever seen. I mean, we've never seen that kind of smoke coming from anything that would ordinarily occur here.
I must also tell you, Claire, I think if you think about what's behind the EOB there, you're really down in pretty open area. It doesn't look like a place where a building would be on fire.
No, that's right, although there are a number of buildings just behind the old executive office building on G Street that could potentially be on fire, but nothing you would necessarily think of as a target. Apparently, we're also...
Claire, let me interrupt you for a second. We now have fire confirmed at the Pentagon. If John McCarthy at the Pentagon can hear me, John, please get in touch immediately if you can and brief us in there. John McCarthy has actually been evacuated from the Pentagon, and parts of the Pentagon are indeed being evacuated. We want to hold our breath here, it just seems to me, for a second, and not get into a mode that the country is under attack. But we now have 2 attacks on the Twin Trade Tower Center. U.S. buildings, city buildings completely evacuated in New York City. We have this mysterious black smoke at the southwest corner of the White House, which is to say there's something going on behind the old executive office building. We now have a report that fire has been confirmed at the Pentagon. ABC's John McCarthy, our Pentagon correspondent, who's been plugging in as quickly to the intelligence and counterintelligence units there this morning, has been temporarily evacuated. But that is as much as we know for sure at the moment. John Miller, go back to what you're hearing on your nets.
Actually, it's interesting. In New York City, they're reporting on what we're seeing here also, essentially trying to tell everybody that heightened security is important now.
John, I apologize. There's a lot of us here. What are we listening to there? Say again. Say again, please. Come here, John.
Constantly reporting that bomb squads, they're checking out Air Force One.
Good. Try to correct. So we have bomb squads.
I think you're going to see a lot of this, and I think we were talking about this a few minutes ago. In fact, when I was telling you that in New York they were evacuating the municipal building, the United Nations, Gracie Mansion, which is the mayor's residence, all potential targets, I suggested to you that shortly in Washington you'll probably be seeing the same kind of reaction at sensitive symbolic locations, and apparently that's become more than a concern, but perhaps a reality.
Okay, we do know, or at least the Associated Press is now reporting, that an aircraft crashed near the Pentagon, and the West Wing of the White House, as Claire Shipman told us, was evacuated amid these threats of terrorism. I guess first of all, let me go to another eyewitness. ABC's Bill Blakemore, one of our senior reporters, has been an eyewitness to the New York incident. Billy, on the phone?
Yes, I am, Peter.
Go ahead.
I'm down at 12th Street. It looks like we're more than a mile north of this very surrealistic site, and business has completely come to a stop here. looks like throughout lower Manhattan. People standing in the streets, cell phones aren't working. A few of these phone booths, such as I'm talking to you from now, are working. One man just shaking his head said to me a few moments ago, I was supposed to be at a meeting in the building at 10:30 this morning, and then I saw the second plane hit the tower in this flash of light. There's a complete cessation of regular life. There's one delivery man standing here looking like he doesn't know where to go with this stack of beer crates. So all of lower Manhattan is just standing in the streets on this sunny morning looking at this unrealistic sight in front of us, this gray smoke coming out of the trade center.
Okay, Bill, talk to as many people as you can. Call us back when you can. Let's return to Washington visually at the moment. Just take a look at that picture. That smoke behind the executive office building, which is right next to the White House, we now believe is from a fire in the courtyard of the Pentagon, or at least where an aircraft appears to have crashed in the general vicinity of the Pentagon. And now the Pentagon is southwest from the White House across the Potomac River, and what we think we may be seeing there, emphasis on think, is smoke in the distance rather than immediately behind the Pentagon. Precautions being taken everywhere. The U.S. Capitol is now being evacuated as a precautionary measure. The U.S. Treasury, according to at least one eyewitness, is being evacuated as a precautionary measure. And there was an explosion outside the Pentagon. And that's an issue of eyewitnesses from both inside and from outside, but we're not quite sure what we're looking at. And we are looking now at Air Force One. We've just been told by ABC's Ann Compton that there's been a serious investigation now, or serious check of Air Force One before the president, who's been in Florida, gets on it and flies back to Washington. All of this, of course, adds to the tension, adds to the fear, but all of it makes absolute common sense. And there is no aircraft in the world, to the best of my knowledge, which is given as intense security as Air Force One, which is what any aircraft the president flies on is designated, of course, wherever it is in the world. And today it's been at Sarasota in Florida. I want to get somebody to fix some monitors here for me, please. I want this monitor in front of me here to look like that monitor, so I know what I'm looking at. Right.
Welcome back to our coverage of the bombing, certainly right here the terrorism attacks with two planes heading into the World Trade Center. The west wing of the White House, I was just told, was just been evacuated just now. So that brings us up to date. And Jim Dolan, you started to talk about what...
This also, after a plane going into the Pentagon,
right.
That report that we're getting. So the nation's capital is also being rocked by this at this moment. Jim, before we went to the network, you were continuing a thought.
We just wanted to report that Abu Dhabi Television is reporting today, this morning, that a group called the Palestinian DXLP is taking responsibility for these two attacks on the World Trade Center. It is the Palestinian Front for the Liberation of Palestine. It's a group with a history of violence, and they are taking credit. We want to point out that there's no confirmation that they were responsible for this, and they fully expect other groups will come forward to talk about this and to take credit for it, to take responsibility for it. But so far, the Palestinian Front for the Liberation of Palestine taking responsibility for the two attacks on the World Trade Center today.
If you're just joining us, the second plane, we got information just before going to network, was hijacked from Boston, the second plane. Don't know where the first one's coming from yet. I'm sure that'll be confirmed later on.
And when you talk about this particular organization, Jim, any relationship or any connection which exists to Osama bin Laden?
In fact, at points at odds with Osama bin Laden, but certainly have the same general goals in mind, and certainly neither one of them any friends to the United States. But also in the past we have heard that Osama bin Laden's organization was much more well financed, much more well organized. It appears that this group is proven that to be untrue.
And of course, this day started off where our top story was this being primary day.
Right.
That was what everyone was talking about. So many hotly contested campaigns going on, races going on, particularly deciding who would be the front runners for the mayoral. But now Dave Evans is joining us with word of things maybe shifting on that front.
I just got off the phone with some executives at the Board of Elections downtown. They are considering right now, and they're researching whether this can be done, whether the primary vote can be canceled. It is certainly no decision has been made, and voting continues as we speak right now, but they're looking at whether this can be done. In the general election, there is a provision under the city's law that a vote can be canceled.